So these are going to be the best decks to climb to Legend, excluding the obvious ones. Pure Paladin, Frost Death Knight, Unholy Death Knight, and Shadow Priest. They are on every list. They will be in the description, but I won't talk about them. First, we're going to start with the Control Priest deck that Meta used. Overall, this deck was phenomenal. I went 16-4 with it on stream and went 5-0 with it off stream when I was just testing it out. Overall, this deck has insane responses to board-based stuff. You have great healing for burn-based decks, and you have enough resource generation to beat control decks like Blood Death Knight. I think that this is the best deck in the game right now, even including the 4 decks that I mentioned before, but the games are really slow, so it's definitely not for everyone. Next up on the list is going to be Big Demon Hunter. I think this is the best Demon Hunter deck out there right now. I thought that nerfing the attack of Fellscale Evoker from 5 to 3, I thought it was going to kill the class entirely. I thought it was going to go to a 0% win rate. They were nerfing it so hard. But apparently it did basically nothing. The deck is still extremely strong. If you can get a Fellscale Evoker out turn 4, 5, or 6 with the Coin or Raging Fell Screamer, there's pretty much nothing your opponent can do, especially after you resummon them with the All Fell Breaks Loose. It's just a ton of pressure with a ton of big minions. It's pretty fun actually, considering Big Demon Hunter hasn't been too strong for that long, but it definitely is a very strong deck. The next deck on the list is going to be Skeleton Mage. Now, I know Mage isn't rated very highly right now on HS Replay and whatever, but that does not change the fact that this deck feels really good. I have played 2 different versions of this deck, and I have gone 6-1 and 11-5 with them respectively. They are slightly different. One's a little bit more aggro, but overall, it feels really good. You get a ton of solid alibis, so people can't do damage to you. You can gain armor with Cold Case, as well as the Arcane Artificer, infinite value generation with the Infatize the Maxitude, as well as Kel'Thuzad to deal with the control decks. And overall, against Big Demon Hunter and things that get big minions, you can freeze a couple of them with the Nightcloak Sanctum and the Glacial Shard. The next deck on this list is Enrage Warrior. I don't know how long it's been since a Warrior deck has been on this list, but it's on here. And I just want to say right now that I personally didn't do very well with it on stream, but I know a lot of streamers and content creators that did do very well with it. It's actually a much harder deck than you originally think it will be looking at it. Sometimes you have to commit to an early Anima Extractor for early tempo. Sometimes you want to go for Olgro, Remornia, and Grommash. Sometimes you need to use Wild Pyromancer for removal, while other times you need to use it for combo stuff. There's a lot of different moving pieces with this deck, but if you want to take the time to learn it, I think you'll be very successful. Next is going to be Thaddeus Warlock. Now, I hear what you're saying. This deck is horribly inconsistent, and I thought so too, but after playing 12 games one stream and I went 10-2, I was like, you know what? Maybe this deck's pretty good. I mean, a well-timed Defile can shut down Paladin ridiculously hard. You do hard mulligan for the Voidcaller and the Slime, so you are consistently getting them around turn 4 or 5, at least like more than 50% of the time. And then you also have a ton of late game win conditions, direct damage to deal with like more control decks. You have big boards with the Dreadlord as well as the Behemoth and stuff to deal with aggro decks. It just feels quite strong, and in your band you have the Jailer and Rivendare and Sunflurry Clergy to deal with aggro, control, and combo. Next on the list is going to be Totem Shaman. This deck has always been a pretty high win rate. I just have never really thought it was that consistent. I think if your board gets wiped 2 times, you basically lose. You can survive 1 board wipe and then you reflood the board, but after that, considering the fact that you have very little draw, it becomes very difficult for you to win. Also, Jive Insect, you can take this out for Bloodlust if you want. Jive Insect's a little bit more fun, but Bloodlust I think is a little bit more consistent. It's up to you. But yeah, the deck is an all-in deck that'll win the game in 6 or 7 turns, or just lose. Another fairly new deck on this list is going to be Face Hunter. It's pretty similar to Shadow Priest, where you have some pretty decent minions and a lot of direct damage. And it's just Hunter's version of that. The hero power is very similar, deal 2 damage, usually to the opponent's face. And yeah, you have a little bit more late game potential with the Astalor, as well as Kael'thas, Hydrolodon, and the collateral damage, as well as Dragonbane as well. So you have a couple more late game options if you don't win the game in the first like 7 or 8 turns. It's not going to be like a late game powerhouse, but at least you're not completely out of the game if you don't kill them in the first 6 or 7 turns. I think it's a pretty fun deck, although Face Hunter is one that's existed for a long time, so if it's not your cup of tea, I totally understand. And last but not least is going to be Big Druid. This has the least amount of stats on it, and I do think that you get absolutely slammed by early aggro, But I think if you're able to get like a Hedge Maze and you're able to get 1 or 2 Death Rattles out on the board and you can stabilize, this deck becomes kind of insane and can get really big really fast. Then you pump them all up with Drum Circle and you can just win games. This one is the most high risk, high reward in my opinion. You'll either feel really good with it or you'll just lose tons of games to aggro and it'll feel terrible. It's really up to you whether or not you want to try this one out, but I will put it in the description for you to try out if you want. These are the best decks, again, not including the obvious 4 or 5 that I named right at the beginning of the video. Blood Death Knight is also good. It's not quite as good as some of the other decks on here, but it's on most tier lists, so I skipped that one as well. But yeah, overall, I would highly recommend most of the decks on this list, and a couple of them, like Big Druid, I would recommend, but just be a little wary that they might be inconsistent.